And action. Just kidding. All right. Oh, fuck. Figured in 2021 we could get wireless fucking everything. Anyways. What do we got? Another edition of Quick and Dirty with Wardo with me, Wardo. Little Suntory Japanese whiskey going into the glass. Just a light pour. Got some things to do a little later. Leave that over there. This is a very easy drinking whiskey that if you're not a big whiskey fan, or you're trying to get a friend or the lady friend into whiskey, this is a good start. Cheers. Oh yeah, that's nice. Big week for myself and everybody at the Journal and Arcadia and everything. We had the film, Winning the Wolves, release. If you haven't watched it, go check it out on YouTube. Pretty happy. Good response from anybody who's watched it. I think it was, Dan is just a genius. Taylor got great shots. Dan's just so good at storytelling, and I think they did a great job at showing the difficulties of what kind of Ben and I encountered out there. I mean, Nolan and Taylor as well, but me being the hunter and Ben being the guide, it was not picture perfect. There was just nothing but weather and elements kind of stymieing us, but did our best, and I think the film shows that well. It was, couldn't be more humbled to have my first mule deer go down on such an epic film. So thanks to everybody who put in so much freaking hard work on that, and thanks to all of you who've watched it, and those who are going to watch it. Go fucking watch it. Cheers to those. Might need another pour there. That is good. What do we got tonight? I think it's going to be kind of quick, because what I'd like to talk about, while I just have some food that rolled around in my mouth from dinner there, a little moose tonight. But what I'd like to talk about is this, and if you're on video, you can see me just kind of rubbing the outside of my knee, this lower outside of the knee, or what I think is horrendously referred to as IT band syndrome. Spoiler alert, quit blaming your IT band. That's not it. So basically, if you're feeling pain in the kind of lateral or outside part of your knee, down the lateral thigh, very close to the knee, and you'll feel it, and it's like, oh man, like there's this big thick band there, and you're like, oh, you need to foam roll it, you need to rub it, blah blah blah, so on and so forth. That's just idiotic, because when we look at, if we peeled the skin back and look at what the IT band is, I mean, it's barely a thickening, and it's just a fascial connective layer that goes, from, it envelops, it wraps around TFL, a muscle up in your hip, like the front top outside of your hip. It, has some stuff with glute max. It hooks into the the side of your leg at the top, and runs all the way down and kind of envelops the lateral quad and the lateral hamstring as well, and then hooks right into the side of the knee. It's just tissue. And what we thought of before was that it was pulling on the bone of the knee, and on the outside of the knee, and that pulling is probably creating some tension on, the fascial connection to the outside of the knee. But what it actually is there's this, fat pad, and sometimes there'll be like a clicking or whatever to it. There's a fat pad underneath that is highly innervated and available for all sorts of feelings, for lack of a perfect term for it. Nociception is what we're getting at, but anyways. So there's this fat pad underneath, and what it seems like is that the lateral leg is essentially drawn too tight. You can imagine, like, if you just grab the side of your thigh and started pulling up, then what happens is the tissue on the side of your leg, your IT band, actually compresses that fat pad. This is like not new, but this is what we're thinking with the research right now, is it compresses that fat pad, which has tons of feels in it. And as it compresses, it gets painful. So why on earth would you put more compression by like rubbing it, scraping it, foam rolling it, so on and so forth, putting more compression into a compression injury? It just doesn't make any sense, right? So what we need to do, and now if you get some treatment and you get the lateral quad and you get the, maybe a little work on the lateral hamstring, and I would probably say the top half of your thigh, that's probably okay. And it's fine. It's certainly not going to harm anything. Might make it feel temporarily better. And that's a good thing. So especially if you're like on a hunt and you're like, oh man, the outside of my knee is killing me. If you kind of like start rubbing the side of your quad and your hamstring and stuff, that's probably good. But I do have a few other tricks in the bag. So one of those things, I'll back up a little bit. So what we do want to do to fix this is look further up. And essentially we need to stabilize the hip and strengthen the hip, glute max, glute med, your external rotators, so that if you can imagine when you take a step, you're not hiking your hip and you're not letting your ass swing out too far to the side. So imagine now you're packing some heavy ass shit up a mountain and you don't have the stability. And this is probably where you want to look, especially around now, guys, like and gals, when we are looking at spring, dead in the face. Spring bear is right around the corner for us in BC. And we want to start getting out there and training. This is going to be a common ass injury, like, no pun intended there, but like the outside of the knee, I see this so much in clinic. So what we want to do is really make sure, one, we're starting, just like I've kind of preached and kind of yelled from the mountaintops about, that we're not starting too much too soon. So you're not like, you know what, I think 80 pounds is a good starting weight. Or, you know what, 50 pounds and I think 8 hours should do it. I mean, if you got it in you, great. But like, let's start smart here. So working into it, letting your hips stabilize, letting the strength come. And if you want to go longer efforts, just make sure you're not loading too much. Don't increase load and time always at the same, or intensity for that matter. So be smart with your adds. So that's kind of a prevention way. So say you have this lateral thigh pain. What we want to do is, lateral knee pain. What we want to do is calm it down, right? Like I'm not a big fan of ice because it slows the healing process down unless something's very fucking swollen. But, get a little rub on there. If you have some athletic tape, some rock tape or something like that, you can throw a little tape on there. It's going to just change how it feels to the skin. That's great. And then what we want to do is start kind of mobilizing the hip. So I love something called like a hip airplane. I think I said that on here before. You can look up that. You can look up like a shin box 90-90, and you can make sure we have the sufficient range of motion in the hips. Shin box get up as well. These are all very easily Googleable terms, or just shoot me YouTubeable terms. Just shoot me a message if you have trouble or you want to make sure you're doing the right thing. You can work the mobility game that way until this thing calms down. And then a couple of the things that I like the most are, I love squatting, it's no secret, but one of the things I think is super important is that I would rather see you get one of those like booty bands that girls use these days, but I'd like you to see, or you can just wrap like a bike tube around your knees, and it's around your knees, and you kind of have a nice wide squat stance. And then I would prefer you to start doing like ripping that floor sideways, full foot loading on the ground, digging the big toe in, trying to rip sideways, and doing probably about 10 squats with a 10-second descent. And what I want to see, or you should feel, is your ass just on fire, the outsides of your ass. That's a great one. And then the other one is anything we're going to work some stability. So single leg deadlifts, any sort of like a rear-legged elevated split squat or Bulgarian split squat, anything along those lines. A lunge in place is great, especially for hiking season. You're going to hear me preach some serious shit about split stance work. I mean, that is what we're doing, is single leg work constantly. It's not very often we're picking something up kind of with both feet in like the same position. So those are some things I think that are important, and we can work somewhere along the single leg work, depending on the weight you're using, probably 4 sets, 8 to 10 reps. If it's really, I like to go really heavy on those sometimes. And I'll use a barbell, or I'll use a couple of heavy kettlebells or heavy dumbbells, in the 80-pound range or so, and like per hand. And I like doing somewhere around like, 6 sets of 4 to 6, just to kind of vary some things up and really work on my foot stability. I try to do these bare feet. Those are the things that we use to cure the quote unquote IT band syndrome. No, obviously, if this is very, very persistent, there's a lot of problems with this. And like, we probably should look at what you're doing in your day-to-day activity. If you're sitting in an environment where your hips kind of constantly cockeyed, where you've got some other stuff going on a little bit higher up into the back, there's also some things that we should be looking at. But for most part, if you're pretty good and then all of a sudden you start hiking or whatever, and you just get this lateral knee pain, don't foam roll it. Don't compress a compression injury, right? Let's work on the mobility and the strength of the hip. A little kind of thing for me, if somebody comes in to see me and they have lateral knee pain, I look at the hip. If somebody comes in to see me with medial knee pain, I look at the foot. I look at both, like no matter what. But what I'm looking at is, that's kind of what I see. If it's medial knee pain, the inside of the knee pain, then it's usually the ankle or the foot that's weak. If outside, it's usually the hip that needs stabilization. If it's the front of the knee, then we usually just have to kind of strengthen it's an overuse injury as well, but it's usually hip function, maybe dorsiflexion. It's kind of could be both. A little sidebar there. So those are the things, you guys, that I think is super important, because this is like coming up in a hot minute here for a lot of people. So just to recap, IT syndrome, fucking hate the name, but that lateral knee pain, think higher up into the glute, right? So we want to work mobility. I said 90-90, shin box get up, and hip airplane, all great things. Those are things I would be doing on a hike too, or a hunt, if you're like having trouble, versus, like a pigeon stretch. I would be actively trying to move in and out of those positions. And then strengthening, and to make some prevention and to get out of that knee pain as well, all of those things, I'll be looking at kind of anything split stanced. If you're bilateral stance, if you're symmetrically stanced, I would go, a band around just above or just below the knees, and really trying to rip the floor apart with good foot loading. Don't try and push your fucking knees out and let your foot come off the ground. That's not a good move. What you want to do is have a good planted foot and think about tearing the floor sideways, and actively trying to do that, obviously without not letting your feet move. And think about that even when you're doing a lunge or a single leg squat, or a single leg RDL. Romanian deadlift is what that stands for. These are the things I would use, you guys. Yeah, like I said, kind of a short one. Check out Winning the Wolves, Suntory Whiskey. We're out.